Effectively 6 weeks study time, and you are having exams. Is it on the 2nd of June? I don't know. Let us conservatively pencil the exams to be 2nd of June, but of course you might have this issue of remotely invigilated exam where the timetable might not be exact, but still it won't differ substantially from it. They don't vary substantially from the session-based date. So I always encourage you to practice. Now, in pursuit of the same, I gave you the question bank. The question bank, because perhaps you wondered how come those who are studying at Athens, you have had a record of these guys passing exams, and you may be wondering what is the secret. The secret is we do have a question bank. The question bank, you need to complete the question bank up to the date of about a week before the exam. I'm sending the question bank for those who have joined us today. The question bank. I have given you the videos already for the previous lectures. So most of the stuff that you say, can you say it now concerning how the SBL paper is like and a lot of other things. Don't worry much about that. It's given in the, all that information is given in the, you can access all that information in the previous videos that I have sent to you. So today we want to discuss change management. It's actually a new topic, change management. And allow me to share my screen, perhaps in the interest of you seeing some of the stuff that I'll be doing here. Change management. Change management. Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm just trying sharing my screen here, and I want to open any executable module so that I'll be typing my stuff there. It's taking some few seconds to open. Allow it to open. Okay. Quite a lot of things that I'm going to say today, but let us have this rapport. Let me create a rapport. What actually are we going to talk about when we are talking of change management? You know, the environment in which firms are operating is ever changing. That is a fact. Coupled by these COVID-induced changes. These ones are a yak of changes. You understand? Changes have taught organizations, COVID-19 has taught organizations that maintaining the status quo is an approach or a stance where doom and gloom, there's doom and actually there's doom, so to speak, where doom is certain. If you don't change when environment is changing, you can't be saying I'm a strategic business leader who doesn't acknowledge the need for change. Clearly, that doesn't augur well because the environment is not, the businesses are not operating in a static environment, but the environment is ever changing. So you would understand that failure to change in line with changes in the environment may result in what is called strategic drift. The risk of failing to meet your mission, the risk of failing to deliver on your critical success factors that you have promised the shareholders and other dominant stakeholders. We call that strategic drift. So that's the logic or the reasoning behind this particular topic we want to discuss, change management. So I want you to, I've given you the notes on change management. Now I have sent you the question bank. Password for question bank is password. This is for those who have joined us. Password is 2005AR. This is the same password for the notes that I'm going to send to you shortly. I'm attaching the notes, the class notes. The password is the same, 2005AR. Always notice that AR is in caps. So all this is complementing to approved content that you already have. Suppose you are practicing using BPP kit, you are practicing using Kaplan revision kit. What I'm giving you acts in a complementary capacity to what you already have. Okay, so let us discuss change management. Change management. Right. Change management. We want to discuss a lot of things there. Write this. The need for change management. The need for change management. The need for change management follows a recognition that the need for change management follows a recognition that organizations do not operate in a static environment. Organizations do not operate in a static environment. Do not operate in a static environment, and failure to adapt to changes and failure to adopt or to adapt to environmental changes, exposes the firm to the risk of strategic drift. Exposes the firm to the risk of strategic drift. Exposes the firm to the risk of strategic drift. You know, if you may ask what that is, say, you know, strategic drift, we are saying the operating environment is changing, but you are not actually implementing necessary changes. You know what? Let me teach you this as managers. The environment we operate in is always changing. You know, from the time immemorial, get it from me, from the time immemorial, there has never been a time where an announcement was made that things are fine and environment is not harming the business in any way. I'm yet to come across such an announcement. What does that tell you? It tells you that don't even complain that today environment is changing, perhaps at a pace which was unimaginable 2 decades ago. No, it has always been like that from the perspective of environmental changes. Changes in the environment were always so radical that an organization had to adapt in order to remain relevant. So change management acknowledges that. A strategic business leader is a leader or a person who acknowledges that what changes bring, you know, changes, they bring opportunities and challenges, opportunities and threats. That's what changes bring. And a strategic business leader now knows that these changes, we need to actively adapt them. Actively, meaning proactively, at times anticipating changes and making sure that we adapt to these changes, exploit opportunities which they bring, try to come up with strategies to, you know, minimize the impact of threats which they bring in order to achieve our strategic objectives. Failure to do that, we say we are exposing the firm to strategic drift. A situation where clearly the firm is in a position not to achieve its mission because it is not implementing necessary changes. We call that strategic drift. So what am I saying in layman's terms? A leader should adapt to changes. If you can't adapt to change, you need not to be a leader. Actually, the word leader nowadays will not apply to you. Right? Models and frameworks. You know, there are quite a lot of models and frameworks there. Oh, before I come to models and frameworks, may you write this? You know, change management recognizes the fact that change management recognizes the fact that by implementing change management recognizes the fact that by implementing a series of changes, by implementing a lot, let's say a lot of changes, comma, by implementing a lot of changes, comma, the firm will execute a change which delivers strategic breakthroughs. The firm will execute a change which delivers strategic breakthroughs. Which delivers strategic breakthroughs. Which delivers strategic breakthroughs. In other words, don't fold hands when the environment is changing. Please don't fold hands. Don't cry victim, tab, the victim tab, to say COVID has ushered us into this particular scenario. Because even if there was no COVID lockdowns, there was going to be another change, which still would have resulted in the same predicament at times. So if you couldn't react positively to challenges and opportunities which COVID brought about, still if the environment was to change in another fashion, you would be caught off guard. So as a manager, you must be agile. Agility is the manager's ability to react quickly, to think quickly, react quickly to external environmental changes. That is called agility. A company which is able to remain relevant in this day and age is a company which is being run by managers or directors with agility and visionary leadership, and primarily which is customer focused. But the key raw materials here being agility, ability to adapt and to think quickly and act quickly, to adapt quickly to environmental changes. We call that agility. Lack of agility explains why most companies were caught off guard by COVID and they are in the doldrums of liquidation and are sponsoring a discourse on a lot of challenges which could have been avoided if managers were agile enough. I'm not saying COVID did not bring about challenges, some of them which could not be, which were inevitable. I acknowledge that fact, but don't downplay the need to be agile. When I'm teaching you to be ACCA members, this is what some of the mandate that I have from the institute. Make no mistake, the institute was able to survive this particular environment because of its agility. Notice, when there was all this, it introduced the remotely invigilated exams. All these are what we call process changes, business model changes. All these are relevant changes for the firm to remain. Imagine a situation where ACCA is not even introduced, CBE, computer-based exams, remotely invigilated exams. What would have been its position in the market by now? And when you are ACCA members, acknowledge the need for agility in everything you do. You may say, what is agility? Ability to think and react quickly. That's agility. Are you able to think, being proactive, anticipate environmental changes and take necessary course of action? That's what we call agility. And when I'm teaching you, when I'm teaching you to be strategic business leaders, I always ask you this. Give me a benefit of doubt. I'm not teaching students. I am teaching managers. So my language, you can say your language, it appears, is directed to managers, not to students. Yes, because you are strategic business leaders. After finishing this course, you must be a strategic business leader. So I was saying, you will implement a change which delivers strategic breakthrough. Don't fold hands. In Shona, we say, matanda mazunungutswa unosiyana rakaora. I like that. You know, those were people of old. They knew that don't fold hands, but try to be agile, respond to things as they change. And in so doing, you will deliver a strategic breakthrough. Chemberekwa chivi yakabika mabwe ikanwa soup, ikanwa muto. You know? Meaning that particular widow was faced with a rocky situation. And this rocky situation required necessary changes. And you know what the widow did? The widow did not just acknowledge that I'm facing a rocky situation, so I need to complain with the rest. No. The widow said, this particular rocky situation is not, it's not in vacuum that I'm facing it. Clearly, they must embed solutions and challenges. And according to old adage, they say, this particular widow facing a rocky situation cooked the rocks and drank soup. I like that analog. It tells us that no matter how hard the situation appears to be, try to implement some changes. And believe you me, you will execute a change which delivers strategic breakthroughs. Don't just go with the rest. Don't just complain with the rest. A leader who complains with the rest, clearly such a one can't be a leader. Now, models and frameworks. Models and frameworks. Models and frameworks. I just, you know, there are quite a lot. When I'm saying models and frameworks, I'm just saying this is the scope of our thinking in the course of our discussion on change management. We are going to discuss one, Lewin's model for change. That's Kate Lewin. Lewin's model for change. Lewin's model for change. Right? And then we want to discuss change life cycle. Change. Oh, well, let me not say change life cycle, but let me say Balogan and Haley, contextual features of change. Balogan and Haley, BH. Haley, it's Balogan and Whoop Haley, but actually let us just say Balogan and Haley, contextual features of change. Contextual features of change. Balogan and Haley, contextual features of change. 3, it's POPIT framework for change design. POPIT framework for change design. These are some of the models that we are going to come across in the course of our discussion. Lewin's model for change, contextual features for change, and POPIT. Right. So number one, just right. You know, when I'm saying models and framework, it's not like we are going to do these models one by one, but they are just going to give us parameters in the course of our discussion for the topic. You know, those who I have taught, they know what I mean. I'm that kind of a tutor who believes in synthesizing. I bring all things together at once to model your mindset and your thinking to be that of a leader. So you shall see this in the course of discussion. It's not like I'm going to discuss model one by one and get to the end. No, we are going to cause you to understand change management by the use of these models. All right. Well, because I'm working with you online, let's say Balogan and Haley. Balogan and Haley. Okay, I just want to, well, I shall come to Balogan and Haley later. And then let me open another. It's Lewin's model for change. Lewin's change model. Lewin's change model, and let's make use of right Lewin's change model. All right. So what I'm going to do, just write Lewin's change model as a subheading. Lewin's change model as a subheading. Lewin's change model. Write this. According to Lewin, comma, an ideal change management process involves three main stages. According to Lewin, comma, an ideal change management process comprises of three main stages. An ideal change management process comprises of three main stages. First stage is unfreezing. Second stage is change. Third stage is refreezing. Unfreezing, change, and refreezing. These are the three main stages which change management process involves: unfreezing, change, and refreezing. Together, that's what Kate Lewin advocates. It's like ideal change management process involves those three main stages. Now I'm showing them on a screen. Don't remember, you still have this video with you up to the date of exam. So some of the stuff you can choose to draw, or you can choose to just have a look at these on your screen. It's still fine. Okay, so it's opening. It's a picture document. It's opening. Yes, so there you go. That's Kate Lewin's model for change. It says when you want to change anything, change involves unfreezing, then change, and refreezing. Can you imagine a situation where you are left with a week before the SBO exam and you don't even know anything? Clearly, you have to do something. You have to unfreeze and change and refreeze. In other words, there's an element where you'll need to change your status quo. What do you mean by unfreezing? As the name suggests, it's like you are unbundling what your status quo is. You want to see, with my current performance trajectory, with my current business model, with my current ways of operations, am I going to achieve my strategic goals? What are the elements of my current ways of doing business which need to change? And that is called unfreezing. So unfreezing would involve determine what needs to be changed. In other words, take inventory of what you are doing. And can you consider this, what you are doing, is it sustainable? And to what extent? You need to understand that. Now, ensure there is a strong leadership and support. Clearly, because leadership or change, change is done by leaders. I mentioned that earlier. I said we need leaders with agility. Leaders who acknowledge that status quo will not take us anywhere in light of changes in the operating environment. Create the need for change. In other words, sell the change to affected stakeholders. I said zero zviedzwa chembererwa chivi yakabika mabwika mwasupu. Please, that statement is so important. And before you cause people to change, you have an obligation to communicate so that you secure buy-in of this intended change from the affected stakeholders. Manage and understand the doubts and concerns. All this is unfreezing. This normally talks about mitigating resistance to change. I'm going we are going to write notes about this shortly. Then change. Change is the actual process of saying after you have unfrozen things, you then have to make sure that you are putting in place the desired processes, the desired activities, the desired changes. You know? So you have to make sure you communicate often, dispel rumors or conspiracy theories, empower action, and involve people in the process. You know, when you involve people in the change process, it has got a bearing in mitigating resistance to change. Then refreezing, it means harnessing the new normal. Harnessing the new normal. In other words, making sure that what you have changed is now sustainable. Putting in place mechanisms for coordination and control of the newly effected changes to make and taking timeous corrective action where appropriate. Now, how do you make sure that the new changes are harnessed? In other words, the new normal is harnessed. Quite a lot of things that you look for there. You need to ensure that the changes are embedded within the culture. The new changes are embedded within the culture. Develop ways to sustain the change, provide the training and celebrate success. Actually, refreezing means you want to be embedded in the new normal. That's what refreezing is. Suppose you have changed and you are now a Christian. Refreezing may involve you making sure that you have a Bible with you. Almost always. Refreezing may mean that even your culture, the places you used to go to, they have to change. The stories that used to entertain you, they have to change. And they must be put in place mechanisms for rewards systems to acknowledge, recognize, and remunerate strong commitment to change. We call that celebration of success. Those who are showing commitment to these changes, there should be a carrot and stick approach somehow to make sure you refreeze the change. You get that? So this is Kate Lewin's change management model. I like it. No wonder why I cited it in Inception. There are quite a lot of change management models. We won't spend much of our time discussing those. You discuss what your say wants us to discuss because you are students of your say. Now, write as a subheading, unfreezing. Right. That's a subheading. We want to discuss what we mean by unfreezing. Write this. This involves undertaking situational analysis or environmental analysis. This involves undertaking situational or environmental analysis to identify the need for change. Undertaking situational or environmental analysis to identify the need for change. That's unfreezing. Undertaking situational and environmental analysis to identify the need for change. Can you open brackets and say, just open brackets and say, to identify gaps in performance. To identify performance gaps in the market. To identify performance gaps in the market. To identify performance gaps in the market, which can only be mitigated by implementing necessary changes. To identify performance gaps in the market, which can only be mitigated by implementing necessary changes. Which can only be mitigated by implementing necessary changes. We call that gap analysis. That is called gap gap analysis or situational analysis. You know what, Takura? What you have to do in business. I don't want a situation where I've taught you SBL and you are in a meeting and saying, look, the challenges we are facing are because of COVID, and there's nothing we can do about it. We wait for the government to open the operating landscape, and then no. That's not how a leader thinks. That's not how a leader thinks. You know what you have to know is you must ensure that you are proactively undertaking environmental scanning, proactively undertaking Porter's 5 forces model, Pestel analysis, to see how your market position is going to be affected, and proactively come up with necessary changes. That is called unfreezing. And unfreezing, like this, unfreezing also involves putting in place mechanisms to secure the buy-in of the affected stakeholders. Putting in place mechanisms to secure the buy-in of the likely affected stakeholders. Putting in place mechanisms to secure the buy-in of the likely affected stakeholders. That's unfreezing. That's unfreezing. Make sure your change is you have actually you have actually make sure that those affected are seeing the need for change. I've told you that. Create the need for change. I've shown you this before now. Meaning the affected stakeholders, you must secure their buy-in. They need to ensure that you manage doubts and concerns by creating the need for change. And it requires strong leadership. Well, then that's unfreezing, right? This unfreezing also involves determining the nature and scope of change. Unfreezing also involves determining the nature and scope of change. Nature and scope of change involves determining the nature and scope of change. That's another attribute under unfreezing. Are you able to come up with the nature and scope of change? Write this, open brackets, and say change definition. Change definition. Change definition. That's what we mean. Nature and scope of change. We call it generically change definition. What are the various attributes that this change is likely to bring to the fore? Who are its likely affected stakeholders in quite a lot of things? That's nature and the scope of change. Write this. Nature of change can be described as sudden or incremental. Nature of change can be described as sudden or incremental. Nature of change can be described as sudden or incremental. That's the nature of change. Changes, you can do changes quickly, or you may take your time to do the changes. So the nature of change can be described as sudden or incremental. Actually some call them big bang. Big bang. When you are talking of sudden changes, others describe sudden changes as big bang changes. When you want to change the nature of whatever you want to change, it can be sudden or incremental. You can check. Suppose you realize that it's now 2 weeks before the exam and you don't know anything. Clearly, you can't say we need incremental changes. You need sudden changes. Write this. Sudden changes include revolution, and transformational changes. Sudden changes include revolution and transformational changes. These are sudden changes. You know, revolution and transformational. You quickly transform. You know, revolution, by revolution, don't write this. Revolution, we are saying you change, you change due to severe external pressures. Like COVID, you know, COVID requires you to aggressively digitalize. If you are a company which is still considering the benefits of embracing technology in a COVID era, you are misplaced. COVID requires aggressive approach to deplatforming your operational landscape. Make sure you are doing whatever you are doing online, no matter the temporary reprieves you are getting. You know, when government is saying we have lowered the COVID, you can now come to town, you can now do business, and before you know it, they've again introduced these are called temporary reprieves. Kunonzi kudzorwa moyo in Shona. And kana uchidzorwa moyo, temporary reprieves. If you think temporary reprieves are a way to go, you're wasting your time. You need to aggressively embrace digitalization of your operating landscape. So important. And more so, you being ACA members, this should not be debatable. Because this is a new normal. Okay? So there you go. What is it that I was saying? I was saying that sudden changes, they are big bang. They can be big bang or transformational. You know, transformational, and I say they should be revolutionary. Like if you are facing these severe external pressures and you are forced to change, we call it revolutionary changes. No wonder why our ancestors, they had to fight colonialism, because they were facing a lot of unbecoming behavior from the settlers. And we call those the revolutionary wars. They were left with no choice but to change. That's a revolutionary. And then there is transformational. Transformational changes, they change the makeup, how you do business, your business model, even your operational modalities, they change. So if you were using manual accounting, and you then realize that there is need to embrace pastel accounting, not to do this manually, but let us purchase SAP, let us purchase pastel accounting. If you can come up with that, we call those transformational changes. Because if I'm to come tomorrow after you have embraced the pastel, it's a new facelift. You have changed quite a lot of how you were doing business. Even your process flows will significantly change as a result. So that is transformational changes. And we do, you know, we also do have like this incremental changes. Incremental changes take place over a long period of time. Incremental changes take place over a long period of time. Incremental changes take place over a long period of time. And they include adaptation and evolution. Incremental changes, they take place over a long period of time, and they include adaptation and evolution. They include adaptation and evolution. Those are incremental changes. They include adaptation and evolution. And you know evolution, adaptation, you know, when you're adapting adaptation is a reactionary approach. You adapt when you are reacting. You are not proactive, but you are rather reactive. Government says now you can come to town, you then go to town. Government says because of COVID you need, or your business is non-essential, you then say our business is non-essential. When you are doing businesses like that, you are adapting. And adaptation, there are circumstances where adaptation might be ideal. And there are instances where adaptation might not be ideal. You know, when schools were closed, other schools were actually learning online. They did not close at all. They didn't close. So you don't say those were adapting. No, they were aggressively transforming their. That one was a like sudden change. It wasn't like adaptation to change, because adaptation by now you have opened just 3 weeks ago. If we go by adaptation as a route, then there is I said evolution. You know, evolution is, these are small incremental changes which are even difficult to notice. Very, very small incremental changes which are very difficult to notice. And as you say, if you go by evolution and adaptation, these are at odds. They are at variance with agility, which I had mentioned earlier. Agility requires sudden changes. So if you go by adaptation and evolution, oh no, those are not really the case. Now you may ask a very good question and say, when we are determining the nature and scope of change, what is it that we consider? Skip a line and say, according to Balogun and Haley, comma, the nature and scope of change is determined by the context in which the change is to be implemented. According to Balogun and Haley, the nature and scope of change is determined by the context in which the change is to be implemented. Determined by the context in which the change is to be implemented. Is determined by the context in which the change is to be implemented. Write this. Balogun and Haley therefore came up with the following contextual features of change. Balogun and Haley therefore came up with the following contextual features of change. Balogun and Haley therefore came up with the following contextual features of change, which must be observed. Contextual features of change, which must be observed by the change agent, which must be observed by the change agent, which must be observed by the change agent for the change to be successful and effective. For the change to be successful or effective. All right. So can you list these one by one in 10? Time. Just I'm reading anti-clockwise, as you can see from your screen. These are the contextual features of change from Balogun and Haley. Can you list these anti-clockwise? Time, scope, that's number 2. Preservation, diversity, capability, capacity, readiness to accept change. You know, on readiness, just say readiness to accept change, and then power. So you can see there are 8 contextual features of change. 8 contextual features of change which Balogun and Haley came up with. You know what? Let me explain why these are important. These are important for one reason, because if you don't observe the context and you want to implement change without understanding the context, chances are the change you want to implement will be ineffective. That's the most likely outcome. If you want to come up with changes, but you ignore the context in which those changes are to be implemented, chances are it's unlikely to be effective. So we have got contextual feature, and then explanation of what it is. Explanation of what this particular contextual feature is. There's contextual feature there, and there's explanation. So let me again remind you what we are talking about. If you implement change without understanding the context, in Shona, we say une dzungu. Have you ever heard of the term dzungu? Dzungu is a situation where you try to come up with changes, but you don't have an appreciation of of the likely consequences of the changes. And should these consequences materialize, the mitigatory or remedial action, you don't even have that in place, but you are busy trying to come up with changes. That's not a good thing. So we always remember, at your level, even when you were doing your whatever you'll be doing at work or even at personal level, you always you are bound to come up with new things. But you realize that these things are failing, not because things are bound to fail, no. But get it from your say now that a change is implemented in context. So the context then becomes the fertile ground, or otherwise, for this particular change. Failure to understand the context will result in you always blaming changes for not being successful. Yet they've been successful all along. But the context, you were implementing them. You couldn't understand the context. So I want you to understand this. Let us now go through the contextual features one by one. There's no contextual feature which is superior to the other. It's a matter of, let us just have them one by one. Let's say power. Power. For you to understand power, let me tell you what are the parties to a change process. Change process. There are three main parties. There are two main parties. There is a change object. Change object. It might appear like a derogatory term, but it's not. If we want you to change in a company, we say you are a change object, because you are the direct recipient or stakeholder to be affected by the change. So in most instances, employees, even directors, will be the change object. And then the individual who makes sure that the change is successful is called a change agent. Known as a change agent. So there is a change object and there is a change agent. So if we are looking at it from this particular class, remember, you do have your misconceptions about SBL. Some say SBL is difficult, SBL is long, so your mindset is ordered in a particular direction, and I want you to change that. So I am a change agent, and you are the change object. Now, for me, being a change agent, to deliver the intended objectives of the change, I must possess some skills and competencies. And I must make sure that when I want you to change, I put it in context. And we call these contextual features of change, according to Balogan and Haley. And one of the contextual features of change is power. Power. Now, on explanation, just write this. This looks at whether the change agent has got power over the change object. This looks at whether the change agent has got power over the change object. Full stop. Right? This presence of power may result in the intended changes being sudden. Present changes may result in intended changes being sudden. Right? Open brackets and say, use professional judgment. We call it UPJ. Right? This use professional judgment to validate the presence or absence of power on the part of the change agent. Use professional judgment to validate the presence or absence of power on the change agent. Over the change object. Use professional judgment to validate the presence or absence of power on the change agent over the change subject. You know, this one is a very important, it's a very important thing. If your mom, when you were doing high school or primary school, your mom would say, I want you to be in the gate, within the yard, by 4 p.m. So your mom was the change agent. She would say, I want you to be within the yard by 4 p.m. And by 4 p.m. you will be within the yard. Why is that so? Because your mom wielded a lot of power over you. You'll be beaten up if you are not. So she had a lot of power. But nowadays, your mom, she's no longer saying you must be at home by 4 p.m. She's actually praying and thanking God that at least you are at home. Why is that so? Because power is drastically or residually shifting away. So important. If you know you don't have power over the change object, don't rush to implement changes. And what you need to do is, in the exam, we don't give you the word power to say, oh, this person has got power over this. No, you use professional judgment. Take, for example, your company is in serious financial distress and it needs bridging finance. You need finance to quickly bring it to your going concern position. And if I say, if I'm a bank and I say, I want to extend an overdraft to you, but you must change A, B, C. Clearly, I will have power over you because I have power over you by virtue of being in a position to alleviate your financial distress. So are you not seeing that is called judgment? In an exam, use judgment to say, if this is the company which is charged with the role of implementing changes, it's most likely to have power over the change object because of A, B, C, D. So don't expect in the exam for us as examiners to tell you that this is power. No, we don't even mention it. Time. That's number 2. Time. Right? This looks at whether there is plenty of time or shortage thereof. There is plenty of time or shortage thereof. In other words, agency. There's plenty of time or shortage thereof for the intended changes to be implemented. There's plenty of time or shortage thereof for the intended changes to be implemented. There's plenty of time or shortage thereof for the intended changes to be implemented. Full stop. Ordinarily, shortage of time may result in the change being sudden. Shortage of time may result in the change being sudden. Shortage of time may result in the change being sudden. That's ordinary. That's the norm normally. Coming back to what I was saying, suppose you want to write exam in 2 weeks and you haven't covered anything. You need to make sure you implement sudden changes. So normally sudden changes are required if the going concern status of a business is at risk. If the going concern status of a business is at risk, like airline businesses. You know, airline businesses were the first to implement digital, to have digital platforms on their operations due to COVID. You know, airline businesses have a huge fixed overhead base, to the extent that the COVID lockdowns were actually resulting in a mounting toll on the firm's operating cash flows, especially when relative to the fixed overheads. So they had to come up with ways suddenly to make sure that they embrace necessary changes, like British Airways, you know, it was the first. It was the first. There are other, like Virgin Airlines, it actually collapsed. Thomas Cook collapsed. Other airlines actually collapsed because they were not that robust. But we know the British Airways, what it did. It was first to digitalize, would buy tickets online, though it was doing it before, but this now was a ramped up mechanism. Even if you are inside the plane, they couldn't, they had a QR code where all you have to do was to scan. If you need coffee, you simply scan and a menu will show up. The menu will show up and you select the coffee, and in other planes, like in first class, the robot will bring the coffee to you. A humanoid robot will bring the coffee to you. So notice, all these were COVID-free operating procedures which they had to implement aggressively and within a very short period of time. Because of that, I'm just giving you an example because your subject is a strategic business leader. Without an example, you may not understand it. That's time. You know, there is a talk in our street lingo which says situation determines the speed. Situation, if you want to do something, situation gives you speed. That's time. Situation gives you speed with which you can do things. There are situations where we don't even have time, and you have to make your changes urgently. And when there's a situation where there's plenty of time, where you can make your changes incremental. Another is preservation. Preservation. You know, you have copied the Balogan and Haley, which is this one. That's where I'm getting everything here. Time, scope, preservation, diversity, and stuff. I'm just getting it from here. So I'm explaining all this. Preservation, you know, by preservation, what we are looking at. We are looking at a lot of things. You know, preservation looks at quite a lot of things. That's preservation. You can't allow someone to change if you are changing everything. Can you imagine? You want me to change. Let us say you want me to change. But you want me to not to have my friends anymore, not to drink what I drink. Suppose you know what I drink, you also want me to change that. You want me to change the church I go to. You want me to change even my profession, whatever I've set myself to be my profession. You want me to change everything. And you don't want to preserve anything. You know, if you want me to change in a 360-degree fashion, you may create resistance within me or resentment, because the things that I cherish so dearly, you are not even preserving them. We don't want such change methodologies because you may create an unnecessary resistance. No wonder Paul, the greatest apostle of all time, Paul was into converting people to Christianity, and he was excellent in achieving the same. But if you want to read how he was able to achieve this, you would notice he said, "To the Greeks, I made myself a Greek. To the Jew, I made myself a Jew." The Greek involves all of us. So Paul wouldn't come to a situation where you were busy eating pork. And then Paul would say, this thing you are roasting is an abomination in Israel. No, Paul would not say such a thing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such a successful ministry of changing people. But what he would do is, when you were roasting pork, you would say, "Can you put some salt and some chili and let us have fun with pork?" And then he would then tell you stuff later, and you would graduate. So change is likely to be accommodated if you preserve something, not you just have a holistic. If I change you right today, Takura, to the extent of changing you, changing everything about you to make you a new person, do you know I run the risk of killing you? You can be killed by, if everything you know is to change today, nothing is preserved. You die. Do you know that? Because you are a function of what you know, what you have accepted as truth, what you have accepted as the real. Suppose everything is to be changed and there's no preservation, you die. So if you want to change employees and you don't preserve key processes, key products, key personnel, you just change. Chances are you usher them in a resentment mode because a holistic or 360-degree change cannot be implemented at once. It's not possible. Write this. Change is likely to be accommodated. Change is likely to be accommodated or to be sudden. Change is likely to be accommodated or to be sudden if the change agent preserves. If the change agent preserves key processes, if the change agent preserves key processes, key personnel, key processes, personnel, products, etc. Key processes, personnel, products, etc. Key processes, personnel, products, etc. Get that? That's preservation. And then there is diversity. 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 Let me ask you this. I want you to type in the chat feature here, bottom right of your screen. Under what circumstances do you think employees are likely to change? If they've got diversity of opinion or if they've got unity of opinion? Suppose you want to change employees in an organization. Do you think they are likely to accommodate your changes if they have got diversity of opinion or if they have got unity of opinion? Talk to me. All right. I said, make you type in the chat feature. Let me see. Caroline saying unit of opinion, unit of opinion, unit of opinion. Okay. Okay. I like your answer. You are saying if people have got unit of opinion, you are able to change them. But if you pause, you will notice that it's not possible. It's difficult, though it's possible, but it's difficult. No wonder why there is a terminology which is called divide and conquer, divide and rule. You know, it is a psychological change management phrase which say divide and rule, meaning if you take, for example, myself and my wife, if you want to change us and we have got unity, it might be very difficult to change us. Very, very difficult, believe you me. We will achieve whatever we want to do because we have got unity. But if you can only find cracks, you can exploit cracks to your advantage. No wonder why at one point we are told that there were inhabitants of the earth who were building a Tower of Babel, meaning they wanted to build something which would reach heaven. And these guys, when they were building a Tower of Babel, the Bible tells us that they had a single language, one language. They were building a Tower of Babel and they had one language. And they tell us that the tower was so tall that God said, these people are one. These people are one, meaning they've got one language. And then God said, whatever they purpose to do, they will achieve it. You know, you know what, guys? It's amazing. It's amazing how God put it. You know what? Put the Tower of Babel aside. But let us talk about this for a minute. God himself said, the reason why this tower is now reaching heaven, almost reaching heaven, the reason why it is the case, God said, it's not because these guys are talented. It's not because these guys, they possess unique skills and competencies. No, it's because these guys are doing it in unison. So there are things that you want to do, perhaps with your spouse, or perhaps with your colleagues, or perhaps with your partners, that you are seeing that such things are not coming to fruition. And you are wondering, is this spiritual? Is this what? No. Look at the unspiritual people who were building a Tower of Babel. The tower was almost reaching heaven, and God acknowledged the reason why this tower is reaching heaven. He didn't say the tower is reaching heaven because these guys are spiritual. No, the tower is reaching heaven because these guys, they possess unique competencies. No, but he acknowledged and said the tower is reaching heaven because these guys have got unity. So let us see what God did when he wanted to change them. Now God was a change agent. He now wanted to change these guys. What did he do? He made sure that there is diversity. So if you want to change, whatever the status quo is in an entity, try to exploit cracks or diversity. So what he did was he had to change the language of everyone. Can you imagine someone now saying, give me a brick in Chinese? Disaster. Someone saying come in Indonesian language, to you it means go. So there was now disaster, and you know what? God is a skillful change agent. He had to change the project and implement the new norm by introducing diversity. So diversity, so change, so write this. Change is more likely to be accommodated. Change is more likely to be accommodated if there is diversity of opinion or perspectives. Change is more likely to be accommodated if there is diversity of opinion or perspectives amongst the change agents. The change object. If there is diversity of opinions or perspectives amongst the change object. Amongst the change object. Okay. If there's diversity of opinion or perspectives amongst the change object, actually use professional judgment on this one. Use professional judgment. You know, when I say use professional judgment, I'm saying in an exam, we don't necessarily use the word diversity, but there are various ways the examiner can tell you that there's diversity. If the examiner says production team is not happy, engineers are not happy, there was a recent disagreement at board meeting, there were disagreements at a recent board meeting, all these words, they refer to diversity. You can only change with ease if there is diversity. If there's unity, believe me, God himself had to cause these guys to speak different languages for him to change them. Otherwise, he could be with the tower even today. If he had not done that, he could be with the tower today. If people had unity, they can do anything they want, and it's difficult to change them. No wonder why they say divided we fall, but united we stand. By saying united we stand, they are trying to say united is difficult to be changed. That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. Okay. I understand you are understanding what I'm saying. Then capacity. Or let's say capability. 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 Right? This looks at the presence or absence of skills and competencies. This looks at the presence or absence of skills and competencies. This looks at the presence or absence of skills and competencies on the part of both the change agent and the change object, on the part of both the change agent and the change object, on the part of both the change agent and the change object, required to implement necessary changes. Required to implement necessary changes. Required to implement necessary changes. That's capability, skills and competencies on the part of both the change agent and the change object, required to implement necessary changes. So if you want, suppose you want to buy a lawnmower for your gardener, and the gardener was using the chisel, what do you call that? The scissor, to cut the lawn. And you now want to say, oh my boy, you can actually use the lawnmower. You may find that the gardener may resist it, not because the gardener doesn't like the lawnmower, but doesn't have skills and competencies to operate it. So there are some changes where you have to train before you implement them. And when you are assessing capability, meaning skills and competencies, I recommend that you carry out an analysis as to, is this change agent skilled enough? What is the experience and what is the the technical know-how of this particular change agent regarding what you intend to do? For example, if the question says this is a firm of organizational psychologists. Let's take, for example, BCG, Boston Consultants Group. It's a company, remember, BCG. We know it as BCG Matrix, but it's a company which is into strategic consultancy for various firms. And everyone on the globe knows that BCG is well equipped in that particular field. So if you hire BCG as a change agent, even suppose we hire BCG for Zimra, we want to turn around the operations and to bring efficiencies to how Zimra discharge its business, and we hire BCG, meaning Boston Consultants Group, even anyone at Zimra will be paying attention to what they are saying because they know the prestige associated with this particular change agent. You get that? So there are various change agents who are not skilled and qualified to cause me to change. And I won't listen to them. No wonder why certain pastors are not even able to cause congregants to change. The reason is a pastor is insinuating or taking the role of change agent, but does not have skills and competencies for that. No wonder why they say this pastor is not spiritual. Because after preaching, nobody is listening. You need skills and competencies to effectively execute the change. So how do we test for capability? You test for capability by assessing the previous changes and were they successful. You test for capability by references. This particular company, has it done it before? So if the examiner says this company is well known for, that phrase, well known for, it would imply or is predicated on capability. It would imply that this person, the change agent, is capable. You get that? Then capacity. There's capability and there's capacity. Capacity. Write this. This looks at the availability or lack thereof. This looks at availability or lack thereof it looks at availability or lack thereof of financial resources. It looks at availability or lack thereof of financial resources required to implement the changes. That's capacity. Looks at availability or lack thereof of financial resources required to implement the changes. Right? So what do we mean? You can't say at your company, let us introduce SAP. You know, SAP is expensive because you may pay 3,600,000 to get the software. Depending on the number of users, you may be asked to pay 1 million to get this SAP software. So what you then have to do is, before you change, do you have capacity? Do you have financial resources necessary to execute these changes? Because some of the changes you may not, you may be unqualified to meet those changes. Are we together? You may not possess enough resources. But I know the world of technology, you can implement simple changes at a very, very efficient or low cost mode. All right? That's capacity, financial resources or lack thereof. And then there is readiness to accept change. Readiness to accept change. Readiness to accept change. Right? This looks at whether there is company-wide resistance or sectional resistance to intended changes. This looks at whether there is company-wide resistance or small pockets of resistance, right? This looks at whether there is company-wide resistance or small pockets of resistance to intended changes. Company-wide resistance or small pockets of resistance to intended changes. Company-wide resistance or small pockets of resistance to intended changes. Write this. Company-wide resistance results in proposed changes being incremental. Company-wide resistance results in proposed changes being incremental. Company-wide resistance results in proposed changes being incremental. You get that? You know, in Parliament, they operate with that. Suppose Parliament, they want to change something. What they do is they put something for whatever they intend to change, they put it for a vote. And if all MPs or majority of MPs, we call it parliament-wide resistance. If there's parliament-wide resistance, whatever they intend to change will not be changed. It will take time to change that. That's what we mean by incremental. But if there are just small pockets of resistance, like 3-4 MPs who are reluctant to accept, they will still sail through. So the same applies to companies. You need to understand, is there a company-wide resistance or a small pocket of resistance? And in doing so, you undertake what is called force field analysis. Because there might be one person who is resisting, but that person is powerful. You know, it's not like everyone, let's say everyone needs it, and only one person who is the CEO is saying, I don't need it. So you can't say because only the CEO is saying, I don't need it, so we can accept it. No, if the CEO is saying, I don't need it, it's the CEO wields a lot of power. So you then have to talk about readiness to accept change and combine it with power that we discussed it at the first day. The CEO has got power and is resisting change, and everyone else needs it. So under the circumstances, even though it's just the single CEO, changes may take long to be implemented. That's how you put it. You get that? So you have to be careful. When I'm saying pockets of resistance, I'm not generally saying few people. I am saying few people, but provided those people, they don't have power. Because you may have a situation where only the CEO is resisting change, which is one person, but that person has got power. So even if everyone is on board with the changes, but the CEO doesn't, there's nothing you can do. Meaning the changes may then take time. Right. Okay. So that's readiness to accept change. And you know, resistance, right? This resistance to change can be addressed by meaning if you are a change agent and you want to minimize resistance to change, you can address this by communication. Communication. You know what communication is? To communicate with someone is not just to tell someone, but is to transmit meaning. You know, people always say, I have communicated, yet you have just told a person. That is called telling a person. It's not communicating. Communication is a symbolic exchange of messages and the transmission of meaning. meaning there's an element of meaning which must be transmitted. So perhaps if people are resisting change, they don't understand the meaning, they don't comprehend the likely consequences of the change. You have to communicate. So how do you resist? How do you mitigate resistance to change? It's communication. Another is collaboration. Collaboration. Collaboration meaning working together. Collaboration involves a lot of compromises. So you have to compromise. You have to come together from your extreme positions and meet halfway. That's collaboration. Another is carrot and stick approach or rewards. You may introduce rewards / punishment for compliance and non-compliance. This normally happens in military. In military, when you don't comply, they don't ask you why, they punish you. Because there's no room for your opinion to be heard. You get punished actually. But in nowadays, even military are employing civility. It depends on who are you in the military. If you are a junior commander and a senior commander is saying something, you may actually try to communicate to your senior commander, and the senior commander may even slide from the position. Communication is important, especially I remember at one point when Aaron and the children of Israel, they slaughtered a calf. When Moses was in the mount receiving 10 commandments, Aaron was busy slaughtering a calf and causing children of Israel to worship. And God said to Moses, whilst he was in the mountain, you know what, Moses? Look at the yak your guys are doing. Because we had just here 40 days, look at what they're doing. I'm no longer taking them to the land of Canaan under my foot. And then Moses, we thought Moses would say, oh, because God is speaking, I had to listen to what, Moses was somebody strange. He said, no, God, if you say you don't want to take these guys to Canaan, here's the deal. Remember, you are the one who has taken us thus far. We have been publishing your name all over from Egypt when those guys, they got slaughtered in the Red Sea through to this day. We have been publishing your name. And now you are saying you can't take these guys to Canaan. Why do you say so? What? These guys who we were publishing and marketing your name, they will then say you failed to take them to Canaan. And the Bible says God repented. Moses was in a position to even preach to God, to say, God, I have to preach to you. And it's a scary thing to know that there was a person on earth who would actually preach to God and God repented from his anger. It's amazing, the power of being a person. We are so powerful that even Jesus said to come and die for us. Remember, we are just coming from Easter. I'm also preaching to you. We are so powerful before God that he loves us so much. The power we yield as Christians is so important that even Jesus said to come and die for us and give us that endorsement of power. Moses did it when he didn't even have that grace. He had to talk to God and say, God, oh, hold on a minute, my boss. Here is operational issues. Here are tactical issues. Here are the strategic implications of what you want to do. So it's amazing. It's amazing. So resistance can be solved by communication. Can you imagine? These guys communicated until they reached a common understanding, and the Bible says God repented when Moses communicated. But at one point we are told that he had a slumbering tongue, but he was able to communicate his position clear to the Creator. Oh, may his soul rest in peace. Now, we are saying communication, collaboration, rewards. Also, there is collaboration, rewards, and punishment. Another thing is participation. Participation is a key participation is a key to solving resistance issues. Why participation is the key is because participation results in a change agent assuming ownership. Now, if employees participate in decision making or in the change process, they don't say, we were told to change. Rather, they would say, we agreed to do this. We agreed to do this. That's participation. And then, last but not least, it's scope. Scope. These are among the contextual features of change. Scope. Write this. Scope looks at whether the change is company-wide or section-wide. Scope looks at whether the intended change is company-wide or section-wide. That's scope. That you want to do, does it affect a section or it affects a company? Whether the change is company-wide or section-wide. Full stop. Write this. Company-wide changes are likely to take time and be incremental. Company-wide changes are likely to take time and be incremental. Company-wide changes are likely to take time and be incremental. Company-wide changes are likely to take time and be incremental. Okay, so by this, what I'm saying is, if you want to change a particular department, like there's a lot of theft, and you want to make sure you have CCTV cameras on points of entry and on sensitive points within the company, that one is a sectional change. You may do it quickly, but unlike a situation where you say, throughout the company, we want to introduce a computerized system, you may actually face resistance because it's a company-wide change. So you have to actually let me sum by saying this. There is no contextual feature which is viewed in isolation. You view contextual feature as a block, meaning they complement and supplement each other. For example, if there is no time, ordinarily if there is no time, the change is likely to be sudden. But notice, can you consider this? Suppose there is no time, but there is no capability and capacity. There is no time, fine, we get that. There is no time. But there is no time and also there is no capacity and capability. You can't say the change needs to be sudden because there is no time. No. You say even though there is no time, the change would ordinarily be sudden, but this is being impeded by absence of capability and capacity to implement these changes. So under these circumstances, the change will tend to be incremental. So you need not to view one contextual feature at once. You need to view plenty of contextual features. You need to, there was a situation at one point in Zimbabwe where we had a first lady who was busy changing the whole makeup of the political party, Grace Mugabe. You know what she used to do? She used to move from one province to another, castigating governors, rebuking them for a lot of issues. Because number one, she had power. But what she led was preservation. She didn't know that even though you have power, but you don't know preservation, meaning you don't know certain areas not to touch. So she was like, I want to change the makeup of the party to my image. I want to change the makeup of the party to my liking. So she was like making sure that there were apologetics. She was putting those who always rubber stamped whatever she said. until she began to say to the army commanders, come and shoot me. Quickly, come and shoot me. And even to the vice president, this our president ED back then. And you know what happened? When she encroached into that territory, she was disposed within 2 months of her encroachment. What does that teach you? It tells you that as a change agent, don't look at one contextual feature in isolation. No. Power should not be looked at the expense of resistance to change. You might have power, but there is still a lot of resistance. You might have power, but you don't know preservation. Certain aspects need not to be touched. Otherwise, if you change everything, can you imagine? You want me to change, you tell me a lot of things. I should change my career. I thought I wanted to be an accountant. And then you are saying you need to change from being an accountant. And then you are saying you need to change even what you drink. Or what the heck is that? You want me to change what I drink. So what then will I drink? So all these are the things that you need to be very careful. Don't just change, cause a 360-degree change. Certain things need not to be touched. So if you can change everything and you know what to preserve, you may get your way. We can all change. So if you know what to preserve, change can be sudden. You can't come to Atlan's Resources here and say, Atlan's Resources, I know you do consultancy, you do what, but you do education and stuff. And you know, when I'm teaching like this, I value it so dear. You can sense it from my voice. And then you are a strategic consultant and you come to me and say, why can't you just focus on organizational restructuring and stuff? No. You are touching on a very sensitive feature. Rather, what you would do is you say, can you focus on this particular business area? Can you give attention to this business area? And then when I realize that business area is rewarding, I may then pivot towards that. Not just suddenly say, can you stop what you are doing and do this? No. Okay, I understand you are listening to what I'm saying. So this is contextual features of change, according to Balogan and Haley. Contextual features of change. Now, continuing, can you write change design? You know, there is unfreezing and there is change. So let us put it as like change design. Unfreezing, we are done with it. Let's say change design. What the actual change that we want to implement. Right? This change design. This looks at the aspects of the entity's performance which are to be affected by the change. Aspects of the firm's performance which are to be affected by the change and how they are to be affected. Aspects of the firm's performance which are to be affected by the change and how they are to be affected. Aspects of the firm's performance which are to be affected by the change and how they are to be affected. We call this change design. Write this. A properly designed change usually affects people, processes, organization, and is enabled by IT. It is enabled by information technology. A properly designed change usually affects people, processes, organization, and is enabled by information technology, IT. Full stop. Write this. This is known as the POPIT framework to change design. This is known as the POPIT framework to change design. POPIT framework to change design. This is known as the POPIT framework to change design. Okay, so what I just want to give you an example of what I mean by that. When you want to change to make sure that your changes are sustainable, normally you go it by the POPIT way. Change people, change processes, change. So this is known as the POPIT framework to change design. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to cause you to draw it, because remember, this is a video which is being recorded, so you still have it in your video. But if you feel like drawing it, you can, because it's a quick thing that you can just sketch. When you want to change an organization, that's change design. Under normal circumstances, you change people, you change processes, you change organization, and central to whatever you are doing, try to automate and do it smarter. In other words, try to embrace technology. Try to embrace technology. That is called the POPIT framework to change design. I'm sure you have sketched it. You can sketch it. I'm giving you 30 seconds. Sketch that in 30 seconds. Right, sort that out, guys. Okay. Right, so there you go. So let us now have these variables one by one as occasions permit. Write this. So there is POPIT. POPIT means changing processes, changing people, changing organization. Write this. Changing people. Changing people. What we mean when we are changing people may involve. Changing people may involve. Here is what changing people involves. If you want to change people, you may train them. Training. That's one way of changing people. 2, development meaning allowing the employees to move higher up the organizational hierarchy. Development is different from training, because by training you are equipping employees with skills necessary to perform current tasks. By development, you are allowing employees to move higher up the hierarchy. It's still part of changing employees. Then there's another way of changing employees is changing the reward system. Changing the reward system. Don't just say we want to do things better and to have organizational excellence when we are not having when you are whilst you are casting a blind eye on rewards. Employees are developmental beings, meaning actually, according to expectancy theory, there are various things which can motivate employees. We know that. Yes, Beck's two-factor theory. It states there are intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. So when you want to change, make sure your composition of intrinsic, meaning job embedded rewards, is the job interesting, is the job giving an enrichment, responsibility, and autonomy to employees. Make sure you address that. Is the job interesting to an employee? Does an employee have autonomy or responsibility over the job? That's intrinsic rewards. The job itself can be changed to make it motivating. No, for sure that. Give employees room to decide what is to be done, how, what, and by whom. So we call that responsibility. Or that job enrichment. You are making the job and you are enriching the job. So that there is, but make sure there is task significant. Not every job can be enriched. I shall come to enrichment shortly. Another issue is extrinsic factors, meaning the operating environment in which we are doing the job, the rewards. What is it that we are paying employees? They have a bearing. They are extrinsic, meaning they are not necessarily directly related to the job, but absence of them may cause the job to be dissatisfying. We know that. Level of supervision we are giving, etc. So, when we are saying change the reward system, that word is loaded. Principally, it boils down to enrichment. Make sure that employees are responsible and they've got autonomy over their work. It motivates. And for you to enrich a job, there are requirements for job enrichment. Not every job can be enriched. Can you imagine? It's a hotel or a restaurant, and someone is in charge of washing dishes. You can't say, because you are in charge of washing dishes, I'm enriching your job. I'm saying do whatever you think is the best way of washing the dish and stuff. No. Certain jobs, even if you give responsibility and autonomy, certain jobs are not that significant. So for me to as a teacher, for me to know that you have enriched the job, my job must be significant. We call that task significant. A job is said to be insignificant according to enrichment principles if it affects the next job. So if what I'm doing can affect the next job in a significant way, it means if I do it better, I can see the results of what I've done on the next stage. That's task significance. Another is task dependence. In other words, for my job to be properly enriched, other jobs should depend on it. They should depend on it. Significance meaning I must be able to see it on the next stage. My handwriting, my footprint should still be visible on the next stage. That's significance. Dependence is others should depend on my task. You get that? Those are the requirements for a fully enriched job. Not just I'm just enriching the job. No. So if someone is just responsible for cleaning windows, well, you need to prove to me that you have enriched the job. Because there are other guys who say, look, I gave you freedom to wash plates and dishes, and you seem like not motivated. No. Enrichment requires task dependence, task identity, and task significance. You know that? Cool. Meaning in final results, if we can see the results at the end of the day, your task should be identified to say, this is what he or she did. It must be identified in the final outcome. It must be significant, meaning on the next stage, you can still see your footprint. It must be dependent, meaning others must depend on what you have done. So if you have done it wrongly, they will be affected. Those are the requirements for any enriched job. Task identity, task dependence, and task significance. So I have a problem with managers who say, I tried to do these organizational psychological aspects on employees, but still it's not working. No, not every job can be enriched. Right, so we are saying reward system. Another is changing leadership style. changing leadership style. It's important. Don't just blame employees. At times, change your leadership style. You know, Jesus himself at one point said to his disciples, now you guys go. I know he then said go at the end, but whilst he was on earth, he actually told his disciples to say, go guys, I am tired. You know, that's when he met the Samaritan woman at the well. But before then, he had even asked his disciples to go and preach. Even Judas Iscariot was shocked when he was casting demons. And Judas said, oh, well, master, the demons were just going just like that. Hey, you know, Judas was shocked. But he proceeded to betray him. In any case, it was God's plan. That one was God's plan. But let us talk about this issue of changing leadership style. If God knew that at times you need to give these guys responsibility to assume leadership positions and begin to navigate the terrain that you think the company can only navigate with you, and everyone was happy, and they reported back and said, master, the things were just going out just like that. We were casting the things just like that. And Judas was shocked. I said, wow. Okay, so if God could do that, to change leadership style, who are you who always think you don't even have that particular inspirational approach to leadership? That particular inspirational approach where people can test hands-on how they are actually feeding into the strategic success of the company. You don't even allow employees to participate in decision making. Under the circumstances, that's not how it is. That's not how it is. That's not how it is. So you change leadership style. Well, you know what? I'm telling you, you may implement change and fail to see the results because you might have improperly designed it. That's changing people. So write this, skip a line and say, changing the organization may include changing the organization may include. Now, if you want to change the organization, here is what it involves. Changing the organization may include one, reconstruction. Let's say organizational reconstruction. Organizational reconstruction. E.g., loss-making subsidiaries, and acquisitions, licensing, franchise. Quite a lot of, there are various ways you can change the organization. You know, you might be a college and say, we want to teach ACCA. Alone, you may not achieve that. You know, even if, Mr. Mpatsi, I want to teach, there are instances, no matter how good I may try to teach, I still need ACCA endorsement. You know, the reason why you are enrolling with me, even if I'm just giving you these jokes, you are taking the jokes at face value. You know that your say is teaching you. The reason is, you know, ACCA has endorsed me as your tutor. So I am changed. You know, I could have just say, let me try to make my name for myself. I would have taken long before you guys can still know that Mr. Pat is a tutor. I'm making my name on myself. It would have taken me years. But seeking endorsement, licensing, franchise, I can now teach under the banner of ACC, and you still say, oh, well, they teach. Even if I'm just trying to explain this, if I had explained this in a manner without the banner of ACC, you might not be even Because you may say, oh, say it appears it's just joking and saying quite a lot of stuff, which is just not. No. Certain businesses are having problems because they are busy carrying on loss-making businesses, loss-making divisions. You know, we are sick and tired of businesses. We say we do have a branch in Southampton, we have another branch in Botswana, another branch in Zambia, in South Africa. Quite a lot of branches all over, but certain branches are like drain plugs. They are busy sucking out life from other businesses. They last reported profit in 2016, and you still hook onto those branches. What do we advise? Undertake a scheme of corporate reconstruction, corporate restructuring. Do away with all that. Sell those. If you can't come up with strategies to unlock value in those, change your organization. I'm sure what I'm saying you can relate. You can actually relate that we have a division which is busy viramenting or sponsoring any other division within the organization. No. So there you go. Then how else can you change organization? You can change organization by delayering. It's another way of changing organization. From your earlier studies, you know, certain organizations are too structured. They've got quite a lot of hierarchies. If you remove certain hierarchies in the organization, hierarchical layers and stuff, you are changing organization. That's changing organization. All right? So you can acquire business units. Suppose you need to grow. You can acquire business units and become a group. You can change what was an associate into a subsidiary, or what was a subsidiary into an associate, so that the organization is changing. How the organization is structured. Another, you can even change governance structures. Governance, changing governance structures. You know, you can change governance structures in an organization. That's another way of changing organization. Meaning, if you didn't have a balanced board, you can now have a balanced board. If the chairman and the CEO was the same, you can now have separate chairman, separate CEO. If you didn't have audit committees, you can still do that depending on the requirements or circumstances that the organization is facing. These changing processes include changing processes include, now when you are changing processes, what you look at when you are changing processes, you include number one, outsourcing. That's one way of changing processes. Two, business process re-engineering. Business process re-engineering. Three, process automation slash simplification. All these are ways of changing processes. You can change a process by outsourcing business process re-engineering, process automation, or simplification. You know, even at your organizations, you can choose to have computer-based examination, like at ACCA. We are now in a CBE learning environment. That was called process automation. Remotely invigilated exams. All these are requisite changes. You can even have outsourcing. You'd notice outsourcing, we do outsourcing it, even at domestic level, you hire a maid. Meaning you are acknowledging that certain functions need to be outsourced. And when you hire a maid doesn't do anything. everything. There are certain tasks which a maid cannot do. Otherwise, if you allow the maid to do everything, you have got unmitigated outsourcing propensities, and you may regret it later. So there are certain processes which can be outsourced. Certain processes cannot be outsourced. For example, you enrolled in this particular subject because you want me to teach you as your BS Mr. Mpats. Now, if I say, today I'm not feeling okay, can you get this from this particular tutor? We say, no, say we enrolled thinking that you are the one who will be teaching us. This tells you that outsourcing has got boundaries. So can you let us now discuss outsourcing? Actually, let us discuss it, because you may outsource, but in the process of doing that, you lose your strategic advantage. You lose your strategic benefit in the name of outsourcing. So let us save that. Write this. Outsourcing. That's one. 1 by 1 in 10. So we are saying changing processes involves outsourcing. Write this. This involves having a process undertaken by third parties. That's outsourcing. Having a process undertaken by third parties. Having a process undertaken by third parties. Write this. Outsourcing partners are usually evaluated on the basis of outsourcing partners are usually evaluated on the basis of outsourcing partners are usually evaluated on the basis of their responsiveness to tender specifications. Outsourcing partners are usually evaluated on the basis of their responsiveness to tender specifications. Responsiveness to tender specifications, comma, commitment to quality, responsiveness to tender specifications, commitment to quality, commitment to quality, etc. That's outsourcing. So important. Commitment to quality, etc. Write this. According to Harmon Process Strategy Matrix, according to Harmon's Process Strategy Matrix, Harmon Process Strategy Matrix, comma, according to Harmon's Process Strategy Matrix, comma, the processes to be outsourced are those which are highly complex. These are the processes to be outsourced are those which are highly complex but of little strategic benefit. Processes to be outsourced are those which are highly complex but of little strategic benefit. Highly complex but of little strategic benefit. Full stop. Write this. Thus, comma, Harmon Process Strategy Matrix, Harmon Process Strategy Matrix, Harmon a Process Strategy Matrix characterizes a process based on the degree of complexity, based on the degree of complexity and the strategic benefit of the process. Degree of complexity and the strategic benefit of the process. That's about Harmon Strategy Matrix. It characterizes a process based on the degree of complexity and the strategic benefit. So there you go. Now, what you are looking at on the board is the Harmon Process Strategy Matrix. Can you take a screenshot of it? Can someone just take a screenshot? Go to your, when you want to take a screenshot, you come to your chat feature bottom right, select more, and then you say take a snapshot. Now allow me to open it there. Can you take a snapshot of the Harmon Process Strategy Matrix? Take a snapshot of it. Anyone to do that, just one to be enough. Okay, perfect. Right. So why is it this in particular I asked the snapshot is because I want you to copy it in your notebook, but you can't copy it now. So honestly, you will leave a space which is sufficient for this. Half a page may suffice. Now, according to Harmon Process Strategy Matrix, when you want to decide which process needs to be outsourced and which process must be undertaken in-house, what you first do is you characterize a process. You get what I'm saying? You characterize a process. And what do we mean by characterizing a process? You consider the degree of complexity of the process and the strategic benefit of the process. So there is an element of low strategic benefit and then low degree of complexity. If you may allow me to just mark perhaps so that you know which quadrant I'm talking about. So let's say we are in this quadrant. This particular quadrant, it has got low degree of complexity and low strategic benefit. The bottom left. What do you do with such a process? It's a straightforward process. This is a process where you can just automate. It's like receipting, like you've got a restaurant. You can just buy a receipting software, be it GAP or any other receipting software. Automate such a process. Because minimum resources are required. Nothing much is required there. Right? So that's process number one. You can automate it. According to Harmon Process Strategy Matrix, you can you know what? You may ask and say, why is it you always mention frameworks or models? It's because by mentioning a framework or a model, I make it possible for you to have a complete answer. I make it possible for you to reduce the risk of over-explaining a single point. So suppose I gave you three processes. You now know that according to Harmon Process Strategy Matrix, there are various quadrants in which a process can fall. Now, suppose we are now talking of this particular process, which I have denoted with an X. The process is low complex, but of high strategic benefit. Low complex, but it's of high strategic benefit. Make sure you do it yourself. Make sure you automate. Don't outsource such a process. Don't outsource. By automate, we are saying commoditize. To commoditize is to do the process in-house. So you can see here that these two here, they are commoditized, meaning such processes are being done in-house. Let us now go to the top now. So suppose there I put Y. In the process where I put Y, notice the process is highly complex but is of little strategic benefit. If the process is highly complex but of little strategic benefit, what you do with such a process is you outsource. For example, payroll. You can outsource payroll. It's a It's a complex process because whatever regulates payroll keeps on changing. The taxes and stuff, they keep on changing. So you can, oh, sorry. Let me have some water. Unfortunately, I don't have a glass, but it's fine. Perhaps this, I don't know the name in English, will just fade away. Now, notice that process, why there you have to outsource it. And I gave you an example. I say payroll. It's very expensive, but honestly, payroll doesn't they really give a firm competitive advantage. Now, let us talk of HH. This process here, which I have labeled V. The process which is labeled V, a process which is highly complex but of high strategic benefit. It's a high complex, but it's also of high strategic benefit. When you are undertaking such a process, clearly, it's a process that you need not to ignore. You have to find some way to improve. You have to find a way of improving such a process. There was a time when Sarah couldn't give birth. The mother of all nations, Sarah, couldn't give birth, and Sarah said to Abraham, it appears this particular process needs to be outsourced. Let us find ways to outsource such a strategically important process. And we all know the consequences. Before we know it, Sarah was busy up in arms, no longer being listened to. It appears all the attention is being given to this Egyptian lady. But that process, no matter how difficult it is, you can't outsource it. You have to find ways to automate it, to do it, to improve it. And God has to intervene. That was the way of doing it. Don't outsource it. We thought when God came, he would say, outsource. No, God doesn't do that. Such a process is a process of high strategic benefit to those parties concerned. The analog is not exact, but it helps you to understand what I'm talking about. You can't necessarily hire a maid and say the maid should just wash every clothes of your husband. Everything. No matter, just imagine. You then come to us and say, I'm up in arms with my husband, and no. I'm telling you, certain processes need not to be outsourced. Certain processes you have to commoditize. You have to do the processes in-house. Otherwise, you externalize your competitive advantages. And that's a travesty of strategic justice. You need not to do that. So I'm just trying to let you understand now. What do we mean when we say a process is of strategic benefit? Write this. Skip a line after you. I remember you have left a space for this. Let me undo it. You have taken a screenshot earlier on where there were no labels like this one. I'm sure you have taken a screenshot like this. Now, what do we mean when we say a process is of strategic benefit? Write this. A process is of strategic benefit if it directly translates into customer value. A process is of strategic benefit if it directly translates into customer value. If it directly translates into customer value and gives the firm an edge over its rivals. A process is of strategic benefit if it directly translates into customer value and gives the firm an edge over its rivals. And gives the firm an edge over its rivals. That's what we call strategic benefit of a process. Now, I have given you the question bank here. Remember, The question bank is, I always say this, and I don't know if I will ever stop saying it. The question bank is the holy grail, meaning the actual thing you wanted from Atlan's resources for you to pass SBL is what you are staring at right now. It's what you are looking at. This is basically what you needed. This is actually what you needed. I'm yet to see anyone who had gone over it and has proceeded to fail. I'm yet to see one. Right. So we have done quite a lot of questions. I have gone over all these questions. I know everything in all these questions. Now this is question number 27, CT transport. Question number 27. Question number 27, CT transport. Question number 27. So there you go. Chemical transport, it's into delivery and stuff. I'm not going to do all these questions myself, but I just want to point to you so that you'll be able then to apply what I've said. It's saying use the Harmon Process Strategy Matrix to analyze the characteristics of each of the three processes identified above and how each should be sourced or implemented. Now, actually saying the three significant business processes areas have been identified in this scenario, which is payroll, legal advice, 3, an enhanced web service allowing wholesalers to request and track deliveries. So these are the three. So city transport is into transporting of goods from one place to another. It's like a haulage truck. Now there are three processes like payroll, legal advice, and web service. Now the issue here is customers are now requesting that they should be able to track whilst their truck or haulage or their goods are being transported. They need to track the transit or the voyage to know where their goods are. They want that, so that they need to. So city transport has to develop a website to make sure that this is being done. And actually, customers are now threatening to leave city transport if it doesn't achieve that. Legal advice, that's another process. City transport is in the business of transporting goods. And these goods, they pass through various countries with quite a lot of different legislations containing traffic and safety laws. So city transport is getting legal advice. So you need to tell them, do they have to outsource it or do it in-house? And then there's a payroll. So the question now is, can you use the Harmon Process Strategy Matrix to advise CT on the characteristics of a process? When they say characteristics of a process, you now understand what this phrase means. Characteristics of a process means is, these two are called characteristics of a process: strategic benefit of a process and degree of complexity of a process. So you need to use professional judgment. Use professional judgment to tell us in what way is the process complex, in what way is the process of strategic benefit, and then make sure you then say, if this process is of low complex but of high strategic benefit, we can automate, we can. But honestly, certain answers are not needed. Can you imagine a student who is saying legal advice can be automated? Can you really automate legal advice? Which software do you think can give you law? There are certain answers which you need to question yourself. Am I thinking? How can you say legal advice, we can automate it? It's like the process is saying there's no CEO, and you are now saying let us automate that role. You want to buy a computer software for the CEO. So when the process, I said, when I'm saying automate, technically speaking, I'm saying commoditize it. Find ways of doing it in-house. There are various ways of doing a process in-house. One of them is automating. Another is to continue doing it in-house the way you were doing it. Like teaching like this. I can't outsource this because otherwise all of you students will be gone. The moment I say, can you try this particular tutor? You'll be gone. You enroll with Atlant because of this, and if at many years that I had to second another tutor for the lecture, they will fire me. Because this is a process which is highly complex or which is low complex, but in final analysis, it's of strategic benefit because that's the process you are here for. So, Takura, I need students who use professional judgment. You know, I don't want any answer which is saying it's just of high strategic benefit without applying to the case. You need to link a process to the customer benefit, number one. Number two, link a process to how it is enabling the firm to offer a superior service over its rivals. If you can only prove those two to me, then conclude by saying such a process is of high strategic benefit. But without linking the two, I don't want an answer which just say a process is of high strategic benefit. That one is a naked answer. You need to tell me why. Can you link what customers are valuing with this particular process? And is this process delivering that? And is it delivering that in a manner which gives a firm a competitive edge over its rivals? If it's not, but still it's of high strategic benefit, you can't say outsource it. No, you say find ways to improve it. If a process is complex, but at the same time it's of high strategic benefit, find ways to improve it. I gave you the Sarah analog and you got that, though the analog wasn't exact, but it helps you to understand what I'm talking about. That's outsourcing. So I said changing processes involves outsourcing. Number two, business processes re-engineering. Business processes re-engineering, right? That is a subheading. We are on changing processes. It involves outsourcing, business processes re-engineering, etc. This is called BPR in short. BPR. Try this. This is a radical and fundamental redesign. This is a radical and fundamental redesign of business processes. This is a radical and fundamental redesign of business processes. It's a radical and fundamental redesign of business processes in order to achieve dramatic improvements. In order to achieve dramatic improvements. In order to achieve dramatic improvements in contemporary aspects of performance. In order to achieve dramatic improvements in contemporary aspects of performance, such as in order to achieve dramatic improvements in contemporary aspects of performance, such as waste reduction, comma, customer service, comma, cycle time, cycle time, etc. Like this. It is also known as process redesigning. It is also known as process redesigning or swim lane analysis or swim lane analysis. It is also known as process redesigning or swim lane analysis. Swim lane analysis. Like this. Processes which are not contributing to customer value creation. Processes which are not contributing to customer value. Processes which are not contributing to customer value are eliminated. Processes which are not contributing to customer value are eliminated, whereas complex processes are simplified. Whereas complex processes are simplified to improve efficiency. Whereas complex processes are simplified to improve efficiency. Complex processes are simplified to improve efficiency. You know, I just want you to see this. Imagine a situation where for you to attend a lecture like this one, let's say every time you attend a lecture, notice already you are on Skype, so everyone who is present is already listed on Skype. Now, can you imagine if I say you have attended a lecture, let us first mark the register. Notice, I am busy marking the register, yet Skype is telling me who is present. Are you noticing that these processes really are not adding any value? I give you an assignment and I say, when you are submitting an assignment, make sure you submit a written copy of the assignment to my address. Here is my postal address. Make sure you go and post or you deliver in person. But at the same time, I am saying I also need a soft copy of the assignment on my email. You can actually see that these processes need to be re-engineered. What the heck is such a process? Certain processes, they don't even add value to customers. So it's an inquisitive model. You have to check, is this particular process contributing anything to the customer? If the answer is yes, retain it. If this process contributing meaningful value to the customer, but is it complex? If the answer is yes, simplify it. Simplify it. Don't continue hooking onto a very complex process which can be simplified. Like suppose here is my pen. I want to just put it on the table, but I do it this way. All these are processes. I take it and then put it here. There are certain factories which are poorly laid out. You know, you see something needs to be taken from a production line to the workshop, but there's no straight route to take things from a production line to the workshop or from a store's warehouse to the to production. There are a lot of checks and balances, some of them where you wonder, are they in any way contributing to value? Or they are actually delaying production process? Or they are actually repeating or duplicating another process? You get that? This is called swim lane analysis, a group of processes being undertaken together to deliver a desired end is called a swim lane. So in your organization, all processes involved in HR are known as swim lane. Processes all with the, swim lane, if you are swimming, that lane. So a company may have 3 lanes. Finance, it's a lane with all its processes. HR is a learn with all its processes. Production is a learn with all its processes. So you need to make sure that within each swim lane, meaning a grouping of processes in a similar department or within a department, the processes are they in any way contributing to customer value? If the answer is no, you redesign those processes by the process of business process reengineering. So I am going to expand this further, but notice I saw a question there. I know you have to do this. Oh, notice this question again is saying, determine the position of the process 2 and 3 on a Harmon Process Strategy Matrix. It's another question. Make sure you do that. Now, the question which I want is this 16-mark question. Notice, if you can only do this question bank, guys, it will be all smiles. Identify and explain 4 problems in the current coursework organization, submission, and feedback process, and suggest the appropriate solutions to address these. Are you not seeing? You are being given, this is a coursework. This is like swim lane. These are the processes which the company is, the processes which the company is undertaking to receive assignments, to mark assignments, and give feedback to students. So I told you that you need to understand. So when you were doing previous courses, especially audit, when you were doing audit, you were doing what is called internal control analysis. So we used to give you like inventory management, inventory system, to say the inventory system starts from this up to this. And the question would be, can you analyze the inventory system, identify weaknesses and consequences of that weakness, and recommend improvements? You know, that was inventory system. It was about thefts and stuff. But now we are now saying competitive advantage. You know, when you're doing auditing, you were finding weaknesses about theft. What can go wrong? Where can our funds be stolen? That was your focus. Where can we pay someone who is not supposed to be paid? That was your focus. If it was asset register, what might go wrong with our asset register? Aren't we at risk of recording an asset which is not there? That was a focus. But now, when you are doing swim lane analysis, like at a strategic level, your focus is no longer about thefts. Your focus is now about, in what way is this contributing to customer value? Isn't this process a waste of time or a duplicating process or a process which is complex and introducing inefficiencies? This is now what you are looking at. You are no longer looking at thefts as if you are doing audit. So when they say recommend areas which recommend improvements, what they are simply saying there is, please try to come up with improvements in this particular process. So this is like a swim lane. Oh, sorry, I had scrolled down to this question in your absence. I wasn't sharing my screen when I scrolled. So this is a question. Question number 25. Try to make sure you understand these. Are we together? So all these are students' feedback. In other words, the students are complaining. So if whenever students are giving you feedback in all this, make sure you can now deduce from the process network here which activity is causing complaints. And if the examiner says identify a process which require improvement, appropriate solutions, these are no longer improvements like we were doing audit where you were looking on where our monies can be stolen. No. This is now about the strategic implications of a process. Is this process leading to customer benefit? Where do you get that from? From students' complaints. If you are getting feedback from students that, oh, well, we are telling us to submit handwritten assignment at the same time, in addition to handwritten, you are also saying submit on, isn't this issue of submitting handwritten no wasting our time, and in the process our assignments are getting lost, etc. So you have to read the students' feedback and realize areas which require improvement. So write this. BPR also involves removing duplicated processes. It also involves removing duplicated processes and disconnects. Removing duplicated processes and disconnects. You know, a disconnect is a process which just suddenly ends. That's a disconnect. Have you ever heard that? Suppose there's a bank. The bank tells you that, look, when a customer comes with a deposit slip and a customer deposits cash, we need 3 deposit slips. We stamp other deposit slips and hand over a copy to the customer. The other 2 copies, one is submitted at the end of the day to the chief cashier, telling the chief cashier that these were the deposits we had for the day. And the other copy is just filed. Now, can you tell me what is the significance of this 3rd copy? In what way is this 3rd copy useful? Because, the chief cashier is given the daily returns of the cash deposited with a deposit slip. The customer is given another with a deposit. So these ones which are getting to the chief cashier are also being filed. It's not like the chief cashier, after getting returns for the day with copies of the deposit slip, the chief cashier will throw them away. No, they are also being filed. And then you are also told that the 3rd copy is also being filed. For what reason now? For what reason? We have this happening in companies, and we are busy hiring clerks who are busy performing disconnects, a process where you can't figure out in what way is this process significant. It just suddenly ends. We need a process where we say, issue invoice, issue quotation, get an order from a customer, issue invoice, issue GRV, get customer goods, issue dispatch note, get a confirmation from a customer accepts the invoice, request payment from finance, etc. That is it. These processes, as you can see, they are leading to delivering value to a customer. Not a process where we say just a 3rd copy is filed. So after filing a 3rd copy, so what? It appears there's another copy being filed by the chief cashier, and a 3rd copy is also just being filed. But in what way is a 3rd copy contributing to customer value? You will notice a 3rd copy is a disconnect. Number 1, it's a duplicate process. Number 2, a process of BPR will remove all that. Write this. Steps involved in BPR process. Write these principles of BPR. Actually, write these principles of BPR process. Of BPR. Principles of BPR. Why I like principles of BPR, it's like this. I like principles of BPR for one reason. You may say, oh, Say's taught me that there's this thing called BPR and I feel like doing it. Well, it's fine. You feel like doing it, but there are principles to be observed. In as much as we said change must be observed in context. If you ignore contextual features, you misfire on the change and screw things up. In the same vein, you tend to screw a lot of things should you implement BPR without observing the principles of the BPR process. So these are the principles, 1 by 1 in 10. Principles of BPR. Number 1, it must be customer focused. Must be customer focused. This is a very important principle. It must be customer focused. Don't say I want to do BPR if you are ignoring the impact of what you are doing on customers. You are wasting time, because we want BPR to achieve cost reduction in quality. When you're saying customer focused, it must achieve cost reduction cost reduction and improvement in quality. Cost reduction and improvement in quality. That's the main outcomes of BPR. Let customers now appraise you after undertaking BPR. Number two, geographically dispersed operations. Geographically dispersed operations must make use of a centralized service. So important. When you have got geographically dispersed operations, let them make use of a centralized service, such as IT. You know, allows them to make use of. If you have got a CBZ branch in Gweru, in South Africa and Zambia, make sure that you make use of a centralized service. Let them have a centralized service. Another is data must be captured at the source. Data must be captured at the source. E.g., having multidisciplinary teams. Teams. Is that the spelling for disciplinary? It should be disciplinary. Well, make sure you sort out the spelling for disciplinary there, you know. As you say, I'm not into spellings. I can sense there's something wrong with that. Now, notice, if you want to implement business process reengineering, you need to ensure that you are capturing data at the source. We can't have a situation where you are writing, suppose we are having a meeting, and you are writing notes in a counter book, and then later on you are busy typing the notes on the word processor. Are you not seeing you are duplicating there? Why can't just taking your notepad or your laptop to the meeting and type your notes on the go? Make sure you type data must be captured at the source. Number 4, its parallel activities must be interlinked. Parallel activities must be interlinked. You know, what are parallel activities? You know, these are activities which may be undertaken at once. We call them parallel activities. They have to be interlinked. Meaning, suppose you want to build a school. 2 activities may be taken at once, like obtaining approval for a plan and buying of cement for initial startup costs. These activities can be taken at once. And under BPR, make sure there's a mechanism, because you may continue buying cement and quarry when the approval has been declined. So make sure there is an interlinkage when approval is declined to cause this other process to be stopped. You get that? Another is employees should be given autonomy and responsibility over their work. Employees should be given autonomy and responsibility over their work. Autonomy and responsibility over their work. And number 6, a process must partake of the process. Those who use the results of a process must partake of the process. That's number 6. Number 7, let me explain 6 and 7 at once. It's like information processing processing must be embedded in the transaction processing system. The transaction processing, information processing must be embedded in the transaction processing system. Now, what I'm saying according to point number 7 is like this. Suppose you are in Pick and Pay a supermarket and you are using a transaction processing system which is called point of sale, any point of sale system that you are using. You know, when customers are actually paying, when customers are when you are charging customers at the till, that process is called transaction system. You are processing transactions. But we don't expect a situation where at the end of the day we need to sit again and say how much sales did we make today and recalculate again. Concerning bread, how much loaves were sold today and begin to redo it again. No. That information must only be available by the click of the button. We must get that information. Merely clicking a button, we should know how many butter, how major quantities of butter, Royco did we manage to sell today. So when we can access that information from a transaction processing system, we are actually consistent with what BPR entails. Another is number 6, we say those who use the results of a system must partake of the process. So BPR actually, it's a radical redesign. Remember, in definition, we say the radical. It's a radical, meaning when you're undertaking BPR, you are starting everything from a clean sheet of paper. It's a radical redesign. How best can I do this if I am to start afresh and make sure that my customers are happy? And the emphasis or the intention of BPR is to achieve dramatic improvements. Look at your definition carefully. BPR results in the achievement of dramatic improvements on contemporary measures of performance or aspects of performance. By dramatic, we are saying miraculous results. You don't say I have done BPR if you just improve by $100. BPR, after undertaking BPR, you must have what is called a quantum leap. A quantum leap. Miraculous improvements in how you are going to, in how you discharge your operations and stuff. Customers must see that benefit. No wonder why. So those who use the results of a process must partake of the process. It's like BPR does not like what we do at work. Say, the secretary is busy typing a report whilst the boss is reading a newspaper, doing nothing. And after typing the report, the secretary then prints the report and gives it to the boss, whilst all the time the boss was just doing nothing. So BPR does not support that. It doesn't support such a state of affairs where someone who is going to use the results of a process is busy doing nothing. And someone is working on the process which doesn't want to use. So BPR does not allow that. If the boss is going to use the report, whilst the report is being prepared, let the boss be there. That's what BPR is. So remember, we were talking about changing processes, and we said changing processes involves outsourcing. We have explained at length on what outsourcing is. It also involves business process re-engineering. I told you the issue of swim lane analysis. Try to take an inventory of your processes. That is called process redesign. Make sure that the processes you have are contributing to customer value. How do you go about it? Can you take stock of customer complaints and see how best I can address those customer complaints by changing or simplifying my processes? And we have got questions like this. which is question number 25 in our question bank. It is saying, identify and explain 4 problems in the current coursework organization, submission and feedback process, and suggest appropriate solutions to address these. I'm giving you pointers right away for you to understand you have actually managed to get me right. Make sure you address these questions as we go. But I'm sure our administration has requested your information. We want to give you assignments on CBE practice platform. But whilst we are waiting for that. These are the pointers to the questions we have to do. Now, next, allow us just to get to 2040 so that our topic was almost done. It's just 15 minutes from being done. So that next week we'll be talking of leadership and stuff. So here we do have process automation. Process automation. Remember, we were saying you can automate, but what do we mean by process automation? Right? This involves using a computer software to undertake a process. Using a computer software to undertake a process. That's process automation. Using a computer software to undertake a process, e.g. pastel accounting. Pastel accounting. Using a computer software to undertake a process, e.g. pastel accounting. Right? The process can be, the software can be developed in-house. The software can be developed in-house. In brackets, we call it bespoke. The software can be developed in-house. That is bespoke. Or purchased off-shelf. Or purchased off-shelf. You can buy a process in-house or you can purchase it off-shelf. You know, you can have your own pastel or your own accounting software, or you can just go to pastel and buy one. So if you are having your own software, we say it's a bespoking approach. You are doing it yourself. You know, I could have my own Skype, develop my own Skype, but that would take me forever to come up with one. Or I can just purchase it off shelf, like having data and we can access it. You can have your own WhatsApp on your phone. You can have your own communication. You know, Trump was banned from using Twitter, Facebook, or WhatsApp, or even YouTube and stuff. He's now coming up with his own. Now he's bespoking his own. So this is what firms can actually do. You can use an off-shelf package like antivirus on your machine. You can have your own antivirus, or you can just purchase ESET antivirus. So you can bespoke your software in the process of automating, or in the case of automation of your processes, or you can actually buy them off-shelf. So now, to just wrap up our discussion, let us have bespoke the processes advantages. Let us have advantages of bespoke software. Sorry, bespoke the software advantages. What are the advantages of bespoking a software? Quite a lot of advantages there. If you have your own software, it means the firm has ownership rights over the software. The firm has ownership rights over the software. If you bespoke or develop it in-house, you have got ownership rights, meaning you can choose to sell it or not. You have ownership rights, which is a source of competitive advantage. Source of competitive advantage. Number 2, there is reduced license renewal fees, reduced exposure to license renewals. Let us just have 3 advantages to license renewals. If you buy, you remember how they do with your software at work. They always say the license is expired. But now, if you have got your own, you are not exposed to that much. Another is the software suits firm's requirements. That's a benefit of bespoking a software. Now, 3, it's okay. Disadvantages of developing the software yourself and developing it in-house. There are quite disadvantages that you come across. The first one is time, requires skills, takes time, requires skills which may be lacking. Can you imagine Takura coming up with your own WhatsApp? Hey. Just laugh, right? Another disadvantage is the firm may not know when to renew the software. May not know when to renew the software. So if you come up with your software, chances are you may not know whether it's now relevant to the demands of the day, so that you have to renew it or what. You may not even know that. Another is performance is guaranteed by the firm. The firm bears the risk. Of the risk of software malperformance. Bears the risk of malperformance. Meaning, if the software fails to perform well, you bear the risk. It's not like you have purchased the pastel. This time it's your own baby. Now, off-shelf packages. Advantages. Off-shelf packages, advantages. Now, the advantages of off-shelf packages, I can just say them out, because if you know the disadvantages of bespoking, you can actually know the advantages of off-shelf. Like softwares which are developed, which you can purchase off-shelf, they are developed by experts. So the advantage is it's quick, and these softwares are developed by experts. That's an advantage. You know, I'm just considering these in reverse. Disadvantages of bespoking, I'm just having them in reverse. Another is the experts or the vendor knows when to renew the software, because these are experts in the field, so they know that your software needs renewal, and this may be lacking if you were to bespoke it yourself. Another benefit is you don't bear the risk of software malperformance. Suppose the software fails, you just call the vendor for rectification and remedial action at no additional fee. These are the advantages of off-shelf software packages. But the disadvantages is, suppose you buy pastel software, it might not be suitable to your unique business needs. In other words, you may need to customize it or to bespoke it again. In other words, you may buy a software which does not adequately address your business needs, and you have to bespoke it. You remember what we call chart of accounts. You have to develop your chart of accounts. You buy a software, it will be a blank with standard accounts and stuff. So if your firm is a law firm, you need to bespoke or to customize or to tailor make that off-shelf package to suit the law firm. So these are the obvious disadvantages. Another is, these renewal fees or software maintenance and support fees, they are very expensive. You buy SAP, they will tell you that whenever you've got an issue, you call us, but they charge you for that. Or they may say, after 1 year, the software will need renewal, and you have to pay a lot for that. So these are the disadvantages. And also, if you buy a software off shelf, you cannot use it as a source of competitive advantage because it's not yours. So if I have got Pastel here, or like I have got Skype, I can say other colleges cannot teach with Skype because Skype is not mine. So I can't then say I have got Skype and it's a source of my competitive advantage. Anyone can have it and begin to have lectures. So this is the disadvantage of purchasing software off shelf. So there are quite a lot of factors to consider. I'm wrapping up now. There are quite a lot of factors to consider when you are choosing the software package. When you are choosing the software package, quite a lot of issues that you consider. Number one, you consider what is called technical requirements of the software. In other words, before you buy a software, let's say in your company you want to buy SAP. Before you buy SAP, consider whether you have got enough hardware which is compatible with SAP. We call these technical requirements of the software. And another thing to consider is functional requirements of the software. In other words, before you buy a software, consider whether this software is good for the purpose it is intended. The software must translate into customer benefit. Don't just buy a software for the sake of it being a software. Let the software translate into customer benefit. It's another. In other words, it's a goodness of fit test. Is this software suitable for its intended purpose? That's one of the things you look for when you are buying a software package. Another, you look for the software vendor. Don't buy a software where the vendor is outside the country, and it's very difficult to like in Zimbabwe here, Pastel Chips Computing. Pastel is from South Africa normally. But Chips Computing has relocated from Zimbabwe and it's now in Zambia. And the hurdles which those who are using Pastel are facing. No wonder why most organizations now are using SAP. Because if you need them, they can quickly come. They are now using QuickBooks, these loose-end softwares with minimum security features and stuff. But Pastel, because the vendor is no longer here, it's now a hurdle for businesses to do that. So when you are buying a software, I said consider technical requirements. Do you have enough hardware which is compatible with the software? Consider functional or business requirements of the software. As a business, are we going to be better off after having this software than in the beginning? Business needs, are they going to be addressed? Is this particular software going to translate into customer benefit? Look at all that. Another that you consider is legal. Is this particular software legally acceptable? You need to consider this. Because before buying a software, if it's not legal, you can't say, I am buying a spamware where I can send unsolicited messages to customers. I want to buy a software which allows me to send unsolicited, unrequired messages to customers. It's a spamware software. It's illegal to have such a software. Or a software which will interrogate personal information on customers. That's a very bad software to have. So it's not legal. So you look at all that when you are choosing the software. You also need to look at things when you are choosing the vendor. Where is the vendor domiciled? Is the vendor easily accessible? You can use references. How the vendor is reliable in terms of quality of the software. Who else is using it? And tender specifications. So do we have challenges? Am I able to access the vendor? And how much is the vendor going to charge me for the software, which is the cost of the software, and also for maintenance, backup, and support? You have to consider all this. And the going concern of the vendor. Don't buy a software from a vendor who is at risk of going concern. Otherwise, you lose a lot of information that you have generated by using that software. So you have to analyze financial statements of the vendor to see the vendor's ability to operate as going concern. So there are two lines of study. There are factors to consider when choosing a software and when choosing a software vendor. When choosing a software, technical requirements, business requirements, legality of the software, functional requirements of the software. When you are choosing a vendor, reliability of the vendor, meaning get some references, location of the vendor, cost that the vendor is charging, and lastly, the going concern status of the vendor, meaning viability of the vendor to operate as a going concern. You have to look at all that. So with that, we have done our chapter on change management. You notice it was loaded. And I must thank you and commend you for being part of this lecture. You have learned a lot. Always, I was repeating, question bank. You don't wait for us to finish all chapters for you to do the question bank. Remember, I gave you the notes already. SBO notes by Mr. Mpati. Those are the notes you use to do questions in the question bank. So you may say, what then is the purpose of this lecture? I am now explaining those notes, bringing it within you, taking them from the book and bringing it within you. And how else am I going to do that? We are going to give you assignments, perhaps on the Independence Day. Come Tuesday, you will receive all your assignments and begin to do them on the CBE practice platform, meaning the platform which really mimics your actual exam environment. Cheers, guys. Goodbye. You have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.